Welcome to Lesson 8, the equation of a line. So yesterday, or our last lesson, you did some work with equations that look like this. What you should have determined when you were using Desmos was that the number that's kind of attached to the x, or the coefficient that goes with the x, is the slope number. And the constant, the number that's on its own, is the y-intercept, or the vertical intercept. So equations of lines often look like this kind of thing, with negative 3x plus 5, or like this. That's partial variation when we have a constant or a constant number added on here. If there's no number, we assume it's a 0. That would mean your y-intercept is a 0. And that would be like this case here, where we have no constant or a 0. And that's direct variation. So those are the two types of variation we already know. This is the general formula for the equation of a line. M will be the number that tells you the slope, and B is the number that tells you the vertical intercept or the y-intercept. When you have an equation of a line, the x and the y, so we know what M and B are, x and y always stay x and y. So look at this equation here, there's an x in it and there's a y. It's the M and B that we try to figure out what those numbers are and replace them. Sometimes we're substituting in a point, then we substitute something in for x and b to help us find out we substitute something in for x and y, and that helps us to find m or b. Mr. Slope Guy, I don't think I've shown you this before, Mr. Slope Guy. So positive slopes, if a slope is positive, it's going up in this direction. A line going down in this direction has a negative slope. Remember that a vertical line like this is undefined, and a horizontal line has a slope of 0. I'm going to put a 0 on both sides because this is Mr. Slope Guy right here. So if you remember Mr. Slope Guy, you'll remember all the main points about the points about slope. Example 1. State the equation of a line with a slope of negative 5 and a y-intercept of 3. So we'll do A first. So here's our big formula, a super important formula, y equals mx plus b. What do we know? What can we sub in? It's got a slope of negative 5. That's going to go in for the m. And it's got a y-intercept of 3. That's going to go in for the b. So that's all there is to it. The equation of this line is y equals negative 5x plus 3. That's it. Now, if that were y-intercept of negative 3, I would make that minus 3. That's all there is to part A. Let's take a look at part B. We've got a slope of negative 1 and a vertical intercept of 1/2. So let's put it into our very powerful equation here. Y equals, slope is negative 1. That's going to go in for m. Y-intercept of 1/2 is going to go in for b. So I don't have to write negative 1x plus b. I can just write negative x, because when a coefficient is a 1, we don't need to write it. So the slope is the change in y divided by the change in x. You already know this. Or another way of writing that is delta y over delta x. That's what the change in y divided by the change in x means. Another way to say that is rise over run. Or the most useful way for us right now is this formula here. So it's important that you memorize this formula, and a lot of times in math we say don't memorize, understand, and of course that's true, but understand that this comes from this. This is our change in the y. This is how we find out how our y is changing, by subtracting them, and this is how we figure out how our x's are changing, by subtracting them. So really what you're understanding is this piece here, change in the y's, which mean how it's rising or falling, and a change in the x's. Example 2, moving along here, and this is our last example. Given 2 points on a line, negative 3, 8 and 9, negative 6, we want to find the slope of the line, we want to find the y-intercept, we want to find all the stuff, and the last thing we're going to do is graph the line. I could graph it right now because my grid's here, but let's go in order. So first we're going to find the slope of the line. Slope, we've got that formula. Now, here's where sometimes we get confused. What do I put in which, all these little things here with the subscripts, where do they come from? Remember that when you look at your coordinates, your two coordinates, think of the one that would come first if I were graphing them. Which one would be first on the left? It would be the -3 and 8. That would be first because 9 and -6 would be way over here. So the leftmost point is -3 and 8. That means this is point 1. So that's my x is x1 and my y is y1. This is my second point. So the 9 is my second x and the -6 is my second y. So I'm going to take all of that and I'm going to sub it into the formula here. y2, look up at the coordinates, which one's y2? That's -6. Subtract. y1 is 8 over x2 is 9 minus x1. Okay, my x1 is a -3 here. So I have to subtract a -3. So I can write it like that, or I could change it to a positive. I'll do that in the next step here. So -6 minus 8 is -14, and this is 9 plus 3. So that's -14 over 12. And we're not done because we have to reduce the fraction. They're both even, so I know for sure I can divide them both by 2. That gives me -7 over 6. And that's reduced, so that's my slope. That's what part A asked for. That's the slope. This is all, I can even put an M here if I want to. It's the same thing as slope. So that's my slope. Part B, find the y-intercept. What we have found, we're going to sub in the slope because we found that already. So let me put this in blue. Y equals, now my slope is -7 over 6. And then I'll put the rest back in blue, x plus b. So the -7 over 6 comes from the question that I just did. So now what? Now how am I going to find b? Because remember in y equals mx plus b, I need to know m and I need to know b. I know m, but I don't know b. So if you remember on the previous slide, what I said was we can sub in for x and b. So I'm going to sub in one of my 2 points. Whatever point I think has the easiest numbers, whatever one I like better, I'm going to pick the first one. The numbers are a little bit smaller, -3 and 8. I'm going to sub that in. Remember that this is an x and this is a y. It doesn't matter now that it was my first x and my first y. That part doesn't matter anymore because I'm only subbing one into this equation. I'll go up to my equation, and where I had a y, I'm going to put first of all my 8, and then I'll put this all in blue here, -7 over 6, and instead of an x, I'm going to put a -3. Let me erase this, it's kind of in the way here. And then plus b. So I substituted in an x and a y into the equation in the right spots. Students often want to take the first one and put it in the first spot, but that's wrong. You have to make sure you get the x and the y in the right spot. So this is 8 equals, remember when we multiply, this is an invisible 1 under the 3. We multiply straight across the top. -7 times -3 is +21. Straight across the bottom over 6 plus b. So I'm going to collect my like terms. 21 over 6 actually reduces. I'm going to reduce that because then I'll have smaller fraction to work with. I can divide them both by 3. So I'm going to write over here 8 minus 21 over 6, except instead of 21 over 6, I'm going to make 7 over 2. I reduce the fraction. That's equal to b. So I brought this over to the other side with subtraction. Okay, I need a common denominator. This is really 8 over an invisible 1. So I need a common denominator, and that's going to be a 2. My common denominator is going to be a 2. So I have to take my second numerator is good. That was a 7. That already has a denominator of 2. But my other one, I have to multiply both parts by 2, top and bottom. That will give me a 16 over 2. So 16 over 2 minus 7 over 2 is 9 over 2. That is B. So we have found both parts that we need. We needed to find the M, which is the slope, and the B, which is the y-intercept. We had to get a value for both of them. We got M here, we've got B here. That's what the y-intercept is. It's the B. So I found that. C, state the equation of the line. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this format here, and I will put it, I'll put it down here. Part C, y equals mx plus b. This is easy. I already did all the hard work. So my equation is y equals m. Here's m over here. Negative 7 over 6. I need the x. The y and the x have to be there. Plus b. There's my b. 9 over 2. The last part says graph the line. So I'm going to graph this line, and what I'm going to do to graph the line is I'm going to have to label my scale. So I think I can probably count by ones. I'm going to put this point on, and I'm going to put this point on. So let's start with that. So I need to make sure all this fits, and it will fit if I count by ones. So I'm going to count by 1, but I'm going to label every second one. So on my x-axis here, this is 2, 4, 6, 8, and I'll be able to fit everything on there. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to press pause and finish labeling my axes. So there's my axes, counting by ones, but labeling every second one. I'm going to put these points on. I'll use red, negative 3 and 8. Negative 3 and 8, put a dot right there for negative 3 and 8. And 9 and negative 6, so I go across 9 units to the right, and then I go down 6 units. 9 and negative 6 is there. So I'm going to draw a line between that, and then when I'm done that, I'm going to show you how to check with this part here. So let me see if I can actually do a straight line here with my tablet. There we go, and I made my line a little longer on both ends, and I have to put arrows on here because these lines continue on to infinity in both directions. So let me just make sure this is right. Looking at the equation that I found in purple there at the bottom, I had a y, that's my b, right? I found a y-intercept, and it was 9 over 2. So 9 over 2, that's the same as 4.5. 4.5. So let's look on the y-axis and see if we got that right. So I'm going up 4.5. Yeah, it looks like my y-intercept is exactly going through 4.5. So that's one way to check. I checked the y-intercept. The y-intercept is right. So I put these 2 points on. I used a line between those. But if I didn't have those 2 points, I would first graph. I would put 9 over 2 on. So if I wasn't given the points and I was just given the equation, I would start by putting on 9 over 2. So let me put that on in purple here. So I would go up first. This is another way to graph it. I would put 4.5. 4.5, I would put a dot there. So pretend the red line's not there. I put a dot on 4.5. That's the first thing I would do. So this is if you were not given, I'm going to cross these points off. If you were not given these points, you're just given the equation. I would first put on 4.5. Then the second thing I would do is I would count out the slope from that purple dot. And we've done lots of examples with that where you count out the rise and the run. So this is actually a fall over a run. So I have, let me put it over here. I first have my y-intercept, and then from there I'm going to fall 7 units, and then from there I'm going to run always to the right 6 units. So let's see if this works. So up to my purple dot, first I'm going to fall 7 units. So I got to count halfway, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's my fall of 7 units. Now I'm going to run 6 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there we are right on the red line. So if I didn't have the red line already in those 2 coordinates, this is how I would get my other coordinate. I would get this, I would put a nice purple dot there, and then I would draw a line. So that is, for us, this is a way to check because we already had a line. So we were just checking here. But if you didn't have the points in the first place, that's how you would graph it using the equation that you found. In your homework, you're often given more than 2 coordinates. You're given maybe 3 or 4. So if you were given 3 points on a line and you had to find the slope, just pick whichever 2 you like. You need 2 coordinates for this. It doesn't matter which 2. Pick the 2 you like, and then between those 2, decide which one is the 1s and which one is the 2s. So if you're given multiple coordinates, you can pick one pair, and then you can check by doing a different pair. So that's a way to check your slope if you're given more than 2 points on the line. So that was pretty quick. It's like a 16-minute lesson. So hopefully the homework will be quick for you as well.